Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another Satanic Panic video. And this one's going to be a little bit different from previous ones, because this one's going to be based on comments I've received in my other videos. You see, when I put up these Satanic Panic videos, obviously there's a lot of comments about them. Lots of supportive ones, absolutely love them. Thank you very much for everyone who reaches out and proves that I'm not completely crazy when I look at these things and think there's some stupid stuff going on. But obviously, we've got some very insulting ones. Lots of ones insulting my appearance. One's calling me a liar for the things I believe, etc., etc. Now, I will deal with them in another video because I think there's some interest in the responses to my Satanic Panic videos. I think that will be as we wind down this series and summarize what's been going across and the feedback I've been receiving. But this one is because in most of my Satanic Panic videos, I've been getting comments that the Satanic Panic's not finished, it's just changed. Now it's Wizards of the Coast attacking gamers and saying that we're the evil ones, that we're the Satanists, we're into horrible stuff. And I don't really get that. So I decided to have a dig about it. Now, I'm not going to go into the people who have made those comments because those people may be well justified in their beliefs. They've maybe been watching other YouTubers, which have led them to believe those things and alerted them to things I'm not aware of. So I'm not going to out anybody in this video. The people who have insulted me, I'll out in a future video. But this video, I'm not going to out anybody. I don't want to say that they're wrong. I'm just going to say what I've discovered. So, what I've done is I've watched a bunch of YouTube videos. Again, I'm not going to out those people. They might have access to information I don't have. But I'm going to bring to attention two articles. Here we've got one on Mail Online. Dungeons & Dragons gets woke makeover that acts as key term and introduces trigger warnings. And this one in the Telegraph, Dungeons & Dragons heading into inclusive oblivion after removing racial differences. This one's from the 31st of December last year, and this one, I can't see a date on it, that 31st of December. So they both come out round about the same time. Now, the reason there's no images shown on this Telegraph one is it's copied down through their paywall. So to get all of the text, I've had to strip the images out. But the Daily Mail one's free to access. This one's by Rachel Bowman, and that one's by Roland Oliphant. So it's not two articles by the same person on the same day. This obviously was a thing at the tail end of last year. Now, starts off, critics have slammed the newest installment of the Dungeons & Dragons rulebook for going woke. In the game's 2024 Player's Handbook, races are now species, and some character traits have been separated from biological identity, according to the New York Times. I would go to that article as well, but it's behind a paywall, and I can't be bothered going through everybody's flipping paywalls. A mountain dwarf is no longer inherently brawny and durable. A high elf no longer intelligent and dexterous, by definition, the newspaper explained. Wizards of the Coast, the Dungeons & Dragons publisher owned by Hasbro, implemented a trend that allows players to stop the game when they feel uncomfortable. Well, let's deal with those things first. The idea that they've separated racial traits from the races isn't something I particularly like. Okay, I will agree with people. I don't think it's a good movement in the game. But their justification for it seems absolutely fair. And it's their game that they want to publish an update for. So it's perfectly valid for them to do that. Their justification is that heroes are non-standard members of the species. So while the average orc might be big and burly and strong and robust, dwarves might be short and robust. Halflings small and dexterous. But that doesn't make everybody in that species. If you want to play an orc who has studied for years and become a wizard, then you should be able to, and you've always been able to. But it's cost you. When you wanted to make up a orc wizard, you'd be getting your bonus strength and the penalties to equal that out, and your character wouldn't be as good a wizard as somebody who got a bonus to intelligence. So your character would always be weaker that way. And that pigeonholes everybody into playing certain races. If you're going to play a wizard, you're not going to play an orc wizard unless you really, really want to roleplay it. There's rules advantages for you not playing an orc wizard. There's rules advantages for you playing a halfling thief. It pigeonholes races into things. And heroes are supposed to be extraordinary. So I totally accept their reasoning for that. Wizard of the Coast came out with that idea, and I go for it. I'm keen to scroll away from the adverts all the time. Sorry about that. And trigger warnings. I think that's a really good idea. If you are going to put sexual assault in your game, let's not use the harsher term. YouTube doesn't like me using harsher terms, especially not in these videos. But if you're going to put sexual assault in a game, and one of your players was sexually assaulted and hasn't felt it necessary to share that with you, you wouldn't necessarily know that that's going to trigger them. So having a signal where they can just go, trigger warning, I don't want to take part in this, and everybody just accepting it without them having to justify it and go, well, actually, I was subject to a sexual assault when I was a teenager, or I was subject to assault last weekend. It's obviously wrong and right that they should be able to step out. So trigger warnings aren't a bad thing. Why are people upset about them? I don't know. Players are encouraged to use gestures such as crossing their arms in an X or raising their palm to pause the game. The signal shouldn't trigger a debate or a discussion. Thank the player for being honest about their needs, set the scene right, and move on. Fantastic. The foreword of the book shared online said the original game excluded and disrespected women, as well as portrayed slavery not as a human tragedy, but a commercial transaction. Well, I'm not sure that's valid, but it's their game. They want to include it. If you want to include slavery in your game, you go for it. You're allowed to. We're all allowed to run Dark Sun at some point, and should. It's a great setting. Robert J. Kuntz, I'm aware that's not really the pronunciation, a game designer who frequently collaborated with co-creator of Dungeons & Dragons, Gary Gygax, told the Times he disliked the changes. It's an unnecessary thing, he says. It attempts to play into this something I'm not even sure is worthy of addressing, as if the word race is bad. The word isn't bad, but it's misused. Different things like orcs, elves, dwarves are different species. They're not different races. A black human and a white human are different races of human, but they're not different species. There's a big difference. So using the right terms makes a lot of sense and allows you to have an elf who's black-skinned. If a player wants to play a black-skinned elf without playing a dark elf or whatever, they should be able to. Without you having to go different species, different race, you should be using the correct categorizations. Dungeons & Dragons enthusiasts and social media users have slammed the company for changing the rules, claiming it's an insult to the creators. No, it's not. It's just updating things. Dungeons & Dragons was great back then, but we all look at it and we see its flaws now, surely. It wasn't created absolutely perfect. There's lots of fun stuff which they've got in the old game, which they don't have in the new game. Stuff which I would love for them to bring back. But it's not an insult to not include those things. Wokeism personified. The player signals what they want adjusted and doesn't have to explain why the content is objectionable. All feelings of any kind must be validated at times without question or debate, one person said. Yeah, for reasons I just said. You don't have to out what's happened to you, which is causing you to be triggered. If, for lesser reasons, if your parent has died, if they were killed, and you go to the game to escape, you don't want to share that with other players. I've been in situations where I've lost loved ones, and I just wanted to go to my game and have fun. And didn't want to get into it, didn't want people feeling sorry for me. But if something had come up in that which involved the parent of my character going to be murdered, I'd be seriously dodgy that weekend. I'd be emotionally vulnerable because I've gone through a trauma fairly recently. And why should I have to explain it to people? Now, to my friends, that's absolutely fine. But if I was going to a group, a college or university group, or some other group, been at various community role-playing groups over my life. Why should I have to explain it to people that I don't really know that well, that I'm just playing a game with, what's going on in my life, and why that's a no-no for me this week? Why shouldn't I just be able to go, no, I'm out? Imagine needing a safe word in order to play a game with your friends. The infantilization continues, said another. Well, I've covered that. Even Elon Musk weighed in saying, nobody gets to trash E. Gary Gygax and the geniuses who created Dungeons & Dragons. What the Star K is wrong with Hasbro and Wizard of the Coast. May they burn in hell. Yeah, well, Elon, he played Dungeons & Dragons apparently, but I don't think he plays it recently. Why is he weighing in at all? Why does anybody care? Others have embraced the changes, claiming they make the game more inclusive for players. Yep. Why shouldn't you be able to play a game and be comfortable at it? Why do we need to include rules and situations to make people uncomfortable when they're playing a game? What they're trying to do here is put up a signal flare to not only current players, but potential future players. The game is safe, inclusive, thoughtful, and sensitive approach to fantasy storytelling. Ryan Lessard, a right and frequent Dungeons & Dragons dungeon master, told The Times. Wanting all your players to be comfortable and have fun is good, actually, one social media user said. Applause for that. Fantastic. I totally agree with those above the idiots before that. I could dig out into the comments, but really, is there going to be anything in here? This is still a fantasy game. I would literally kick out any player who is so weak-willed and sensitive they had to cross their arms and need an adjustment because they are emotionally crippled and weak. People aren't allowed to be sad now. You're weak if you're sad. If you've been assaulted, if a family member's died, if for any reason you're feeling emotionally weak, you are weak and you should be punished. What a lovely guy Ron the Con is. Does Con mean he's a convict? Is he in prison? It sounds like he probably should be. The wokerati have taken over even the world of fantasy. Sounds about right. The woke left are offended by mythical beasts. Where does it say that? Seems to hold to sign the past, get successful doing making what people want, yada, yada, yada. Board game should be a fun place. People realize this game's made up. The rules are made up. You can play any way you want. Fantastic idea. Love it. Nice to see there's positive comments there. And on to the Telegraph article. So, Dungeons & Dragons heading to inclusive oblivion after removing racial differences. Wokery Row is fantasy tabletop game criticized for removing racial differences between its cast of orcs, elves, and dwarves. Dungeons & Dragons has been criticized for removing racial differences between its cast of orcs, elves, and dwarves. Repeats itself a lot, this. In the new rulebook for fantasy tabletop game released in September 2024, orcs are no longer inherently strong, nor elves intrinsically brainy. If you want to play an orc who spent all his time in a wizard's tower studying, why should he have massive muscles? He's got the potential for that, but he hasn't used it. So there should be some kind of rule built in there that he is potentially able to go out and give up all this stuff and exercise and build up muscle. So perhaps something between body size and strength, but you're getting overly complex there. Players who are made uncomfortable by an event can now shut it down at any moment. Quite right. Announcing the change the rules which replace race with species, Wizard of the Coast said race is a problematic term that has prejudice links between the real world people and the fantasy peoples of D&D worlds. Fair enough. To start a game, players must choose their avatar from a range including halfling, human, gnome, and dragonborn, a humanoid species descended from dragons. Who calls it an avatar? I've got a feeling the author of this doesn't really know what they're talking about. Below the 2024 update, each class came with a boost to different attributes. A hardy hill dwarf enjoyed a +2 lift to Constitution, something that could help them as they navigate the game's map of enemies and challenges. And the new rules, the hill dwarf is not naturally tough, can instead come from one of 2 different backgrounds. I actually think there's, 15 or so? There's a lot of backgrounds that you could be. Minor, which restores the +2 Constitution, or Scholar, which adds +2 to Intelligence. What they're describing is just kits. If we remember the kits from the old complete books, where You could choose to be a standard elf and get your bonuses to charisma and intelligence, or you could choose to be a wood elf or green elf who would get a bonus to strength. You could have a 19 strength as a starting wood elf character because you chose the right kit. Why is it such a massive change? This was something that was done in the late 80s, I believe the complete books were. Maybe even earlier than that. Shift follows earlier reformed two classes, Orcs and Vistani, after criticism they're drawn from negative racial stereotypes of black people and Roma gypsies. Right, I don't follow through with that. I don't agree. I don't think that Orcs are a negative racial version of black people. And the problems with dark elves being evil, well, they're not black people. They're sort of black-purple. They're not a really natural color at all because they live underground. They've got this weird pale highlights to them as well, as if they are nocturnal and never getting access to the sun. I saw drow as being something completely different to just black elves, but apparently lots of people just draw that. I think that says more about them. Some dungeon masters, the referees who shape the game, feel the reforms are detracting from the magic of the game. All the species are becoming humans with decorations. They always have been. That's been one of my major problems with role-playing games, that humans are treated as standard. Instead of having a standard set of things, and then humans are advantaged in their own way. They kind of did a bit in 3rd edition and after that, where humans have their versatility and stuff like that. So instead of just being 18 maximums everywhere, they had their own advantages. But that always felt like it was keeping up, because all of the other species were always humans with extra bits bolted on. Humans with pointy ears and infravision, and they don't need to sleep, and all the other things, bonuses to using different weapons they had in 2nd edition, is an elf. Ones with extra constitution and tremor sense, and that's a dwarf. It's a human with extra stuff bolted on. It's been a problem with Dungeons & Dragons since day one. Humans are the stock standard, and then everybody is better than that in some way, instead of humans being their own thing. Criticism intensified when the Coos released a book, the original Making of Original D&D, to celebrate the game's 50th anniversary. In the foreword, Dungeons & Dragons historian John Peterson notes a virtual catalogue of insensitive and derogatory language in the original 1974 game, including words that are casually hurtful to anyone with a physical or mental disability who happen to be old, fat, not conventionally attractive, indigenous, black, or a woman. Well, there is some of that. I don't think Dungeons & Dragons was the worst offender. If we remember when we looked through Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and homosexuality was a mental disorder in that. That's problematic and totally wrong. And Dungeons & Dragons did touch on that. But those were the times it was published in. We didn't have the internet for people to do absolute research. It was based on their own experience. And Gary Gygax was already getting to be a middle-aged man when he published it. So his education had been decades earlier. It's an unfortunate fact that women seldom appear in the original D&D, and when they do, they're usually portrayed disrespectfully. Well, fighting man, for example. Slavery appears in the original D&D not as a human tragedy that devastated generations over centuries, but as a commercial transaction. Oh, in a fancy world, I can see that happening, as long as it's always portrayed as evil. It's a financial transaction that people will buy slaves, that slavers are still going to be the bad guys. Takes aim at cultural appropriation, including gods, demigods, and heroes range, writing, were players expected to fight Vishnu, one of the principal deities of Hinduism, kill him and loot his +3 sword of demon slaying. Critics argued the forward unfairly smeared the game's creator, Gary Gygax, who died in 2008, as a misogynist and a racist. I don't think they should do that. I've not read the book, but he's a product of his time. We've all got kind of racist grandparents out there somewhere. Elon Musk urged Hasbro to burn in hell. Yeah, well, whatever. Wizard Coast earlier confirmed they had hired inclusivity consultants for making original D&D. The consultants had helped identify language we would not use today in gaming. That's decent. I don't see a problem with that. For many of today's players, the row comes not down to race, but the nature of the game. The restrictions inherent in the old races what made the game challenging and created a sense of risk. One user wrote, feels like everything is focus grouped into inclusive oblivion. Races and classes in a fancy make-believe role-playing game are gradually being reduced to aesthetics. The demystification of things like goblins and orcs is also a travesty. Not everything has to be a morally grey soup. Some things can be inherently evil, and that's okay. But orcs are a player character race now. That's the difference. That's the problem people are having. Because you're not just having orcs as monsters to be killed. You can have evil black dragons, because nobody's playing a black dragon. But when the player characters are playing dark elves and orcs and things like that, they're probably not going to be playing evil ones. And the whole thing with dark elves are evil, is the rules in the old one. Except the most famous dark elf is a good one. And he's surrounded by a cast of other good dark elf characters. They suddenly don't become that rare. So every dark elf is evil is wrong and has been since about 1989. So it's about time for the rules to catch up. What else we got here? New definition of orc in the 2024 handbook. They are a smiling family of nomads. They have children, elders, well-cared-for houses, and pet orcs. We're supposed to recognize them as us rather than other. Because they are us. They are players. I'm playing a half-orc in the moment. Now, the removal of the half races from the current version, I have a problem with. I don't like that. I like their idea about being able to choose to be a half-orc, half-dwarf, and combine the features of those to make your unique character. And the current way of doing it, where if you want to play a half-orc, you're playing a human or an orc, you just get to choose which one. I don't like. I like that other thing that they were going to introduce, but they seem to have gone for this halfway house without including rules and just churning out something where the half races don't exist. And I've got a problem with that. In my family D&D game we play on a Thursday night with my nieces, my nephews, my kids, and me. I'm the old one. Most of the party is half orcs or half elves. So the idea that the current rulebooks basically stop those characters existing, especially when we go back to Dragonlance, and one of the most famous characters in that is Tanis Half-Elven. So now he's Tanis Human, Tanis Elven, I don't know, because he doesn't exist in the new rule set. I don't like that. I would have much preferred if they'd gone the way they had. But, as I was saying, orcs are us. They're our player characters. They're not the other anymore. D&D is not a game about creating intercultural harmony in a multiracial community. The rules still center violence, exploration, acquisition, and growth through adventure, making orcs more than mindless antagonists in a world that requires henchmen and goons, simply passes the buck to someone else, hobgoblins, bugbears, giants, or whatever. Yeah, it kind of does. And it's never going to be a perfect game. Nobody's perfect. Anyway, having a look at some of these pictures. So, this is the picture of orcs that they put in. Now, there's been a lot of criticism online that they've made orcs Mexican. Now, I can almost see what they mean. Now, they're wearing wide-brimmed hats. They're in an area with cacti. And apart from that, they are a family. They're traveling. They've got hawks. They're hunting. They're being nice to their children. This seems all right, even when I was running orcs as just monsters in older editions. They had their cultures. They had tribes. There were villages of them, and they looked after their children. If an orc child was hurt, the adults would come and protect them. This image doesn't really throw anything out. They're in a desert. There's cactus there, and they're wearing wide-brimmed hats to protect their eyes from the sun. Why does that make them Mexicans? I've got other criticism of the picture. I don't particularly like all this white stuff down this corner. Almost as if they were going to paint in more and they never got around to it. It's a sort of painted style, so it looks a bit blurry to me. But I like the colors. It's a nice blue sky. And It's a desert setting, which you don't tend to connect with orcs that much. A nice image. Now, my submission to other people who do have further problems with this being they're making orcs Mexican is that this is the only image of orcs in the player's handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide that I could find. I went through it all. I was looking for orcs to go, haha, there's no, they're not making orcs Mexican because here's this other image. And there aren't any. So I'm a bit sad about that. I would have liked to have seen more orcs. Orcs kind of make Dungeons and Dragons a bit for me. The classic species, orcs, elves, dwarves, halflings, humans. When you're including tieflings, genasi, dragonborn, all that, they all feel very modern to me, late editions, and they don't feel very fancy and very Tolkien-esque fantasy at my core. That suits the world. When it gets too busy with different races, I find it a bit problematic. Why are all these different races living together? How far do they have to quest to start up a family when there's only one dragonborn trader in the town or whatever? But I think it's an all right image. What other images do they have problems with? The gay dwarfs. This is the one I wanted to come to next. Now, this has been paraded around. They're making dwarfs gay. Okay. The other thing they say about it a lot is they're making gay dwarf bakers. Well, this dwarf in the middle is not a baker. He's obviously a blacksmith. He's working with another one, and they're crafting something. There's a furnace there in the background. He's been brought a tray of pies to the shop. Everybody's turning around, quite happy that he's bringing them lunch. There's a cat at his feet. It's a nice image. But the problem people have is this dwarf and the one with the tray of cakes have each other's beards tattooed on their arm. And this shows that they're a couple. And I don't see a problem with that. I have a tattoo on my upper arm here, which is identical to the one my wife has, because it's our initials, our wedding date, sort of wreath around them, love hearts and that. We got it on our 10th wedding anniversary to get permanently marked because we're going to remain together forever. And that's kind of nice. I find that these dwarves with each other's beards tattooed on them cute. I find it a bit problematic that if they decide to change the style of their beard, then the tattoos are going to be out of date. But a hairstyling thing probably shouldn't get tattooed on you. But I see no problem. Okay, there's a couple of gay dwarves in it. What's the problem here? You don't have to play it. The rules aren't telling you you are homophobic if you don't have gay dwarves in it. They're not telling you you have to play gay dwarves. They're just going, here's an image. And the last image I wanted to show that people have problems with is this one. I think there's another picture somewhere, but this was the one I could find easily because there's somebody in a wheelchair. Now, Dungeons & Dragons is becoming inclusive, allowing people with disabilities to see themselves represented in the game is fantastic. And as I've said in previous videos, someone who is fully able, a straight white guy, I want to play something not me. I get to be me. I get to be a white, male, straight guy who's not disabled, fully abled, for 365 days of the year. When I'm playing a game, I want to play something different. I'll rarely play human. I will often, turns out 50% of the time, I check my characters. I play 50% time female. And the idea of playing somebody disabled who has a clockwork wheelchair or steam-powered or magic or whatever, who can't go upstairs as easily, but can turbo boost their way down corridors so can sprint much faster because they've got these clockwork wheels. That's interesting. It's another option for me as a player. I support that. Give me options. It's why I don't go out complaining, even though I don't like Dragonborn and Tieflings and all that in my game. I won't stop somebody playing them because it's an option for them. And why do people have problems with disabilities? People who hate gay people, people who are racist, etc., and have problems with that in their game. At least that seems to have some kind of justification, even if I totally disagree with it. It's got historical justification, I mean, rather than actually any logical justification. But being against disabled people, why would you even? That could be you. I don't get it. Anyway, as I said, I've been having people saying that Wizard of the Coast is going against us, choosing, making the rules so we are being seen as racist or homophobic or whatever. And I don't get that. I've looked through these things. I've read through the Player's Handbook. I've started to read through the Dungeon Master's Guide, and I see nothing in there which says, oh, if you don't do this, you are bad. It's all just options. Why are people having problems with having options? Anyway, I think I've probably been whittering on for way too long, so thank you very much for watching. As always, most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.